The morning sky looked calm, but inside Mira's heart, storms were gathering. She stood before the mirror in her wedding gown, touching the lace around her neck again and again, forcing a smile that felt weak. Everyone around her believed she was the happiest woman alive. Her friends were dancing. Her mother kept saying, "You're blessed," and the man waiting at the altar, Liam, looked at her with the kind of love that could melt anyone's fear. Yet somewhere deep inside, Mira wondered if she was truly ready. She had dreamed of marriage since she was a little girl. She wanted a home filled with laughter, pictures on the wall, and soft kisses before sleep. Liam seemed perfect for that dream. He was kind, humble, and calm. But as the wedding bells rang, she felt a strange silence grow inside her, like a small voice asking her if love alone could feed the heart forever. She ignored it and walked down the aisle with a bright smile, thinking love would be enough. The first few months were sweet. Liam woke up early every morning, kissed her forehead, and went to work with joy. He would return with small gifts, fresh bread, fruit, or a flower he picked on the way. He told her stories about his students, how they made him laugh and sometimes cry. Mira listened at first, smiling at his gentleness, but slowly the charm began to fade. The house was too small. The walls felt too close. When it rained, the roof made a sound she hated. She began to notice how little they owned, how plain her clothes were, how quiet their evenings felt. Her friends posted pictures of shiny houses and new cars. Mira compared her life to theirs and began to feel less. Liam was still kind, still loving, but his kindness started to irritate her. She wanted adventure, not contentment. He tried harder. He worked 2 jobs, came home exhausted but still smiling. He sold his old phone once just to buy her a gift. When he placed the small box in her hands, hoping to see her joy, she thanked him politely, but deep inside, she wanted something bigger, something that would make her feel proud. Each day she looked at him and saw not love but limitation. One rainy evening, he came home drenched, carrying her favorite bread. "Look what I found," he said softly. She didn't even turn to look. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. Liam's smile faded. He asked nothing, just stood there in silence. When she finally packed her bag, he said only, "I hope you find what you're looking for." His calm voice followed her as she closed the door. The city greeted her with lights and noise. Everything felt new and exciting. She found work, made new friends, and met Ethan, a man whose presence filled every room. He was rich, handsome, confident, the opposite of Liam in every way. He took her to expensive restaurants, bought her clothes she never dreamed of owning, and spoke to her like she was rare. Mira thought she had finally found the life she wanted. When Ethan proposed, she said yes, without hesitation. The wedding was loud and colorful, with cameras flashing and guests whispering about her good fortune. She looked around and thought, "Now they will see I made the right choice." At first, everything glittered. The house was large, the cars new, the travels endless. But soon she discovered that luxury can be cold. Ethan was always busy. He smiled for the cameras, but rarely for her. When she wanted to talk, he was on a call. When she reached for his hand, he was checking his schedule. He bought her everything except time. She lived in a mansion but slept beside loneliness. She tried to tell herself it was normal, that successful men were always busy. But her heart disagreed. She missed the sound of laughter, the feeling of being seen. One night after a silent dinner, she asked, "Do you love me?" Ethan looked up from his phone and said, "I provide for you. Isn't that enough?" Something inside her broke quietly. The next morning, she left. Months later, Mira met Daniel, a gentle pastor whose words carried peace. He spoke softly about forgiveness and faith. She thought maybe this was her second chance, not through wealth, but through spirituality. They married quietly. For a time, it was peaceful. He prayed with her, took her to church meetings, and told her she was blessed. Mira felt safe again. But slowly she noticed how much he loved being praised by others. The women in church adored him, and he enjoyed their attention. He cared deeply about his reputation, but not about her feelings. When she told him she was lonely, he told her to pray harder. When she needed comfort, He gave her sermons. One afternoon she found him laughing too freely with a church member, his eyes holding a look she recognized too well. She said nothing, packed her things, and walked away. Another home, another ending. For months she stayed alone, telling herself she was done with marriage. But when Leo appeared, a younger man full of jokes and energy, she let herself laugh again. He was spontaneous, playful, and made her forget her sadness. They married quickly, driven by excitement rather than wisdom. At first it was fun. They danced, traveled, and lived like friends more than spouses, but soon she saw the emptiness beneath the laughter. Leo was careless with money, avoided responsibility, and turned serious moments into jokes. She needed stability. He needed entertainment. Their love melted like sugar in rain. One morning she looked into the mirror and barely knew the woman staring back. She had been a bride 4 times and still didn't know peace. Her eyes looked older, her smile tired. She whispered, "Maybe the problem is me." But pride pushed the thought away. Then came Victor, the powerful politician everyone respected. He spoke with confidence, promised her comfort and importance. After all the pain, she wanted safety, and Victor's world looked safe. They married in a public ceremony, filled with photographers and speeches. For a while she enjoyed the attention. People admired her beauty and position. She smiled beside him, pretending her life was perfect. But behind the fame were secrets. Victor had other women, and lies spread like smoke. When scandals came out, Mira's name was dragged into them. She tried to defend herself, but the media was louder. The same crowd that once praised her now mocked her. Her world collapsed again. She returned home to an empty house, sat on the floor, and cried until her voice was gone. She cried not for Victor or Leo or Ethan or Daniel or Liam. She cried for herself, the girl who once believed love was about what she received instead of what she gave. Time passed. Seasons changed. She learned to stay alone. She learned silence. And then one afternoon, as she walked through a bookstore trying to distract her mind, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Mira." She turned and saw Liam. He looked older but peaceful, his eyes calm and kind. He was successful now, managing a small school. A wedding band shone on his finger. He smiled, not bitterly, just kindly. They talked for a while, about the past, about life. He spoke about his new wife and their children with quiet joy. Mira listened, her chest tight. When they said goodbye, he wished her well and walked away. That night, Mira sat by the window watching the sky. She thought about the first bread he brought home, the quiet love she once rejected, the peace she had traded for pride. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they weren't angry. They were clear, healing tears. She whispered softly, "Now I understand." Love, she finally realized, was never about wealth, power, or perfection. It was about patience, forgiveness, and truth. It was about holding someone's hand through the rain, even when the roof leaks. It was about staying kind when life turns hard. And as the night breeze entered through the window, Mira smiled for the first time in years, not because she had found someone new, but because she had found herself. Mira spent the next few months in quietness. Her world had finally stopped spinning, and for the first time she allowed silence to teach her. She stopped rushing into new faces, new promises, new beginnings. The mirror no longer scared her. She could finally look at herself and see not failure, but a story. Every morning she made tea, opened her window and watched the sunrise. It reminded her that even after long nights, light always returns. She began writing small notes about her journey, words that came from pain, but sounded like healing. "Love is not what you find," she wrote one morning. "It's what you grow." She started volunteering at a small orphanage near her house. The children there had little, yet they laughed like they owned the world. They called her Aunt Mira, ran to her every morning and hugged her without reason. Their joy softened her heart in ways no romance ever had. One boy named Toby always followed her around. He was quiet, shy, and often drew hearts on paper. One day he gave her a small drawing, a heart with cracks filled with gold. "It means broken things can still be beautiful," he said. Mira stared at the drawing for a long time, tears gathering in her eyes. That night she placed it beside her bed, whispering, "Maybe that's what I am. A heart with cracks filled with gold." Slowly, her days became brighter. She began to forgive herself. She no longer hated the woman who made mistakes. She began to understand her. Every heartbreak, every loss, every wrong choice had shaped her into someone softer, wiser, and real. One evening, as she walked home from the orphanage, it began to rain. Normally, she would have rushed for cover, but this time she didn't. She lifted her face toward the sky and let the rain wash over her. The cold drops touched her eyes, her cheeks, her lips, and somehow it felt like mercy. After that day, she started seeing life differently. She learned that love doesn't always come in the form of another person. Sometimes it comes as peace, friendship, or quiet gratitude. She filled her apartment with flowers, read books about purpose, and began to smile without forcing it. Then one morning she met Noah. He was fixing the gate outside the orphanage. A carpenter, calm and modest. He greeted her politely, his voice gentle but strong. At first she didn't think much of it, but as days passed they began to talk more, about life, about struggles, about how both of them had learned to rebuild what life broke. Noah was different. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't promise anything, he simply listened. When she spoke, he paid attention like her words mattered. His simplicity confused her at first. She was used to grand gestures, not quiet understanding. One day, while they were painting a broken bench together, he said, "You know, love is not perfect people finding each other. It's people deciding to stay when things stop shining." Those words stayed with her for days. For the first time, she didn't feel the rush of romance, she felt peace, and it scared her. Peace was something she used to run from, but now she didn't want to run anymore. Weeks turned into months. They began spending more time together, not in luxury but in laughter. He would bring her roasted corn, she would bring him tea. They shared stories about their pasts, their fears, and their hopes. Mira didn't realize when her heart began to heal completely. One evening Noah asked, "Do you still believe in love?" She smiled softly and said, "Yes, but not the kind I used to chase. This one is quiet. It doesn't shout, it stays." Noah looked at her and said, "Then maybe you finally found it." She didn't answer. She just looked at the sunset, feeling tears build in her eyes, not from pain, but from peace. Years later, they got married in a small garden behind the orphanage. There were no cameras, no noise, just friends, children, and laughter. Mira wore a simple dress, barefoot on the grass. When Noah took her hand, she felt something she had never felt before: safety. Not the kind built from money or status, but the kind that grows from trust. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real. They argued sometimes, laughed often, prayed together, and shared simple meals. Every morning, Noah kissed her forehead before leaving for work, and every evening she waited for him with gratitude. One afternoon, Toby, now older, came to visit them. He looked around the house and smiled. "Aunt Mira," he said, "you look happy." She smiled back. "I am," she replied softly. "I finally found what love really means." After he left, she went inside and sat beside Noah. The radio was playing softly, and the evening sun touched their faces. She closed her eyes, remembering her 5 marriages, the broken promises, the pride, the pain, and for the first time, she didn't feel ashamed. She felt thankful, because every heartbreak had led her here. Every failure had prepared her to understand this simple truth, that real love doesn't complete you, it accepts you even when you are incomplete. As she rested her head on Noah's shoulder, she whispered, "I used to think love was about finding someone perfect, but now I know it's about finding peace in imperfection." Noah smiled and held her closer. "And now you've found it." The wind moved through the window, soft and calm. Mira smiled with tears in her eyes. She had finally arrived at the place her heart had been searching for all along. The years that followed were quiet and beautiful. Mira had finally found what she once thought impossible: peace. She woke each morning to Noah's calm smile, to the sound of birds outside their window, and to the laughter of children from the orphanage nearby. The world felt gentle again. She no longer waited for grand moments. She had learned to love the small ones. Their life was simple, yet full. Every Sunday, they went to church and then walked by the river, talking about dreams and the past. Sometimes Noah would bring his guitar, and she would hum softly beside him. It wasn't the kind of love that shouted or sparkled. It was quiet, steady, and kind. But time has a way of testing everything we claim to understand. It began with Noah's health. He started coughing often, saying it was just the dust from his workshop. Mira believed him at first, but weeks passed, and the cough worsened. She begged him to see a doctor, but he kept saying, "I'm fine, don't worry." One night he coughed so hard that he fell to his knees. Mira ran to him, terrified. The doctor's words the next morning felt like a storm. Noah had a heart condition that had gone unnoticed for years. It wasn't too late, but he needed rest, medication, and care. Mira's peace was shaken, but not destroyed. She stayed by his side every day, cooking his meals, reading to him, and making sure he took his medicine. There were moments when fear whispered in her mind, reminding her of all the times she had lost love before. But this time, she refused to run. She stayed. Some nights, she would sit beside his bed, holding his hand, praying silently. Noah would open his eyes, smile faintly, and say, "You're stronger than you think." Those words became her anchor. Months passed, and though Noah's health improved a little, life became more demanding. Medical bills grew heavy, and Mira had to take more work to support them. She started baking pastries to sell in the neighborhood, waking early every morning before sunrise. The work was tiring, but it kept her going. One afternoon, as she returned home exhausted, she found Noah waiting at the door with a flower in his hand. "For you," he said softly. Mira smiled through tears. She realized love wasn't just in gifts or words. It was in moments like this, when two people carried each other through life's weight. But the road ahead still had more lessons to give. A year later, tragedy struck the orphanage. A fire broke out at night, and though most of the children were saved, 2 rooms were badly burned. Mira and Noah rushed there, helping the caretakers rebuild. They worked day and night, raising funds, painting walls, repairing furniture. It was hard, but it gave them a renewed purpose. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the orphanage caretakers brought a little girl to Mira. Her name was Hope. She had no parents, no relatives, and she barely spoke. But her eyes carried a sadness Mira recognized too well, the kind that came from loss. At first, Mira visited her every day. Then she started bringing her home on weekends. Slowly, Hope began to laugh again. She called Noah Papa and Mira Mama. Months later, they decided to adopt her. For the first time, Mira had a family, a husband she loved deeply, and a daughter who healed parts of her heart she never knew were still broken. They became inseparable. Hope would draw pictures of their little family, 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. She would place them on the wall and say proudly, "That's us." Life finally felt whole. But as with all stories of love, peace must always meet pain. Noah's heart condition returned, this time more severe. The doctor said he needed surgery, but the cost was far beyond what they could afford. Mira sold everything she could, her jewelry, her furniture, even the small bakery she built. Still, it wasn't enough. One evening she sat on the hospital floor holding Noah's hand, whispering, "Please don't leave me." He smiled weakly and said, "You already know what love really means. It's not about how long we have. It's about how deeply we give." Those were his last words to her that night. The surgery couldn't save him. Mira didn't scream or faint. She just stood there in silence, tears falling like rain that wouldn't stop. It was as if the world had turned grey again, but this time she didn't run from pain. She let it stay. She let it speak. The days after his death were quiet. Too quiet. The bed felt empty. The mornings too still. But hope was there. Her small arms, her gentle voice, her laughter. Mira looked at her and saw Noah's light living on. Slowly, she began to heal again. She worked hard to raise Hope, sending her to school, teaching her to be kind, strong, and wise. Every time Hope laughed, Mira felt a little bit of Noah's presence in the air. Years passed. Hope grew into a bright, confident young girl. On her 16th birthday, she hugged Mira tightly and said, "Mama, you've given me more love than I ever dreamed of." Mira smiled, her eyes wet. "Because someone once taught me what love truly means," she whispered. As the years rolled by, Mira aged gracefully. Her hair turned silver, her hands carried wrinkles of experience, but her heart stayed soft. She became known in her community for her kindness and wisdom. People came to her for advice about relationships, forgiveness, and healing. She always told them the same thing. Don't chase love. Grow it. It begins with you. Sometimes when she sat alone in the evenings, she would still talk to Noah in her heart. "You were right," she would whisper. "It wasn't about perfection. It was about staying." Hope went on to study medicine, inspired by Noah's story. She promised her mother she would help heal others the way she wished she could have healed him. Watching her grow gave Mira new purpose, but as life often does, it gave her one last lesson. One cold evening, Mira fell ill. Hope, now a young woman, cared for her just as Mira once cared for Noah. The days were slow, the nights long, but Mira wasn't afraid. She knew her story was ending, and for the first time she felt complete. Hope sat by her bed and asked softly, "Mama, are you afraid?" Mira smiled faintly and said, "No, my child, I have lived 5 lives of love and 1 of peace. That's more than enough." That night, she closed her eyes and dreamed of Noah waiting by the riverside, holding flowers like he used to. When she walked toward him in her dream, there were no tears, only peace. And when morning came, Mira was gone. But her story lived on, through Hope, through the children she cared for, through every person she taught to love without fear. In the end, her life had not been perfect, but it had been meaningful. She had learned that love is not about never being broken. It's about learning how to heal again and again. The world around her had slowed down. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the rush of fear or the pull of loneliness. She had found peace in the small house she shared with Daniel. No noise, no drama, no pretending, just the gentle rhythm of a life that made sense. Every morning she woke up beside him and saw love in its quiet form, in the way he brewed her tea, in the way he waited for her to finish praying before speaking, in the way his smile could erase 1,000 worries. Her life had never been this calm. Yet sometimes she would sit by the window and remember her past, the glitz, the cars, the rings, the photos, the parties, the heartbreaks. The first man had taught her what pride looked like. The second showed her how lies can destroy. The third gave her a taste of freedom that came with emptiness. The fourth proved that money doesn't cure loneliness. And the fifth showed her how fragile the heart could be. Now with Daniel, she learned that love isn't about perfection, it's about presence. Months turned into years, and they built their small life together. He didn't have riches, but he had values. He respected her voice, her dreams, and her past. They opened a small shop together. She sold handmade candles and simple jewelry, while he did furniture repairs beside her. People in the neighborhood loved them. Children called her Auntie Lila, and she smiled every time. One evening, while closing the shop, she looked at Daniel. His hands were covered in sawdust, his shirt torn a little from work. Yet he smiled, bright and pure, and she felt tears in her eyes. "You're crying again," he said softly, brushing her cheek. "It's just," she whispered. "I used to think love was about what someone can give you. But you taught me. It's about what someone stays to give, even when you have nothing." He smiled. "Then I guess we both learned what love really means." That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying everything in her mind, her mistakes, her lessons, her growth. Love had taken her through 5 broken paths, just to lead her to one true door. But then, something unexpected happened. Daniel fell sick. It started as a simple fever, then grew worse. He became pale, weak, and quiet. Lila tried everything: medicine, prayers, even selling their shop to afford better care. But the sickness grew faster than hope. One evening, as she sat beside him in the hospital bed, Daniel held her hand weakly. "Don't cry," he said, smiling faintly. "You gave me the best years of my life. I wish I had more time to love you longer." She shook her head, crying harder. "No, don't say that. You can't leave me, Daniel. You're all I have." He looked into her eyes, the same eyes that once carried pride but now carried love. "You'll always have me. Even when I'm gone, my love will stay here," he whispered, touching her chest gently. "Right here." That night, he closed his eyes and didn't wake up again. Lila's world shattered. She sat in silence for days, unable to speak. The one man who showed her real love was gone. She thought about how she had wasted so much time chasing shadows in the past, only to find light and lose it. But as days passed, something began to change inside her. She remembered Daniel's last words: "You'll always have me." She started writing again, turning her pain into lessons. She wrote stories about love, not the kind seen in movies, but the kind that heals, forgives, and grows through storms. Her small writings began to spread online. People started following her posts. Women who had been through heartbreak wrote to her, saying her words healed them. Men said they learned how to love better because of her stories. Through her pain, she found her purpose. Years later, she stood on a small stage during a seminar on love and life. She wasn't the glamorous woman she once was. She wore a simple gown and no jewelry. But her smile had power. When she spoke, her voice was calm and deep. "I married 5 times, she said. Each time I thought I had found love, but I was wrong. Love isn't found in beauty or money or gifts. It's found in truth, patience, forgiveness, and presence. Sometimes life breaks us not to destroy us, but to teach us. I was broken 5 times, but I needed those breaks to understand what love truly means." The hall was silent. Some people cried. Some nodded slowly. After the event, a young woman walked up to her, tears in her eyes. "Ma, your story saved me," she said. "I was about to give up on love." Mira smiled softly and held her hand. "Then promise me something. Don't chase love. Grow into it. And when it finds you, never take it for granted." That night, as she returned home, she looked at Daniel's photo on her bedside table. She smiled. "You were right," she whispered. "Love never dies. It just changes form." She turned off the light, lay down and closed her eyes. Peace filled her heart, the kind of peace only love could give. For once, she wasn't waiting to be loved. She was love itself. Moral lessons. Love is not found in perfection, but in patience and understanding. Sometimes failure is not the end. It's the teacher that leads you to truth. People come and go, but the ones who teach you love never really leave. True love is not what you receive, it's what you give without fear.